video, we're going to look at grouped data in statistics. In this question, I've taken it from DBE November 2017, paper 2, question 2, and I thought let's use a question out of an exam right from the start to explain this concept. And you will notice that a student conducted a survey amongst his friends and relatives to determine the relationship between the age of a person and the number of marketing calls the person received within 1 month. The information is given in the table below. And you will notice an incomplete table. Now, very often with a grouped data question, they will complete the frequency column for you and ask you to complete the cumulative frequency column. And to get the cumulative frequency column, we will just keep adding the next line in my frequency. But in this case, I decided to actually choose an exam question, so it's slightly more difficult, but let's see how we can complete the table. So first thing I know that my first line is 7, the cumulative frequency is 7. So normally I would add the next number in my frequency column to get 27. I don't know what that number is, so I have to ask myself 7 plus what will give me 27, and it's plus 20. Then 27 plus 25 gives me 52. That's the next number in my cumulative frequency. Then 52 plus 12 will give me 64. Then 64 plus what number gives me 72? 64 plus 8 gives me 72. And then 72 plus 4 is 76. And 76 plus 4 gives me 80. So a slightly trickier way to start, but really not too difficult to do. The next question is, we asked how many people participated in the survey. Well, if you add the frequency column, you will get 80. But hopefully you notice that 80 is also the total, or the last number, in my cumulative frequency column. Because remember, cumulative frequency just means I keep accumulating the frequencies. So by the time I get to the end, I've included all my frequencies. So 80 will be how many people participated in the survey. If you asked to write down the modal class, now mode, we should know from raw data, is the number that occurs most often. Now, I don't know specifically how many people are 20 years old or 21 years old or 22, but I do know that there's 7 people between the ages of 20 and 30. All right. So if I want to know the modal class, I've got to find the greatest number of people in one single interval. And the greatest number of people is 25, and they are between the ages of 40 and 50. So my modal class is 40 to 50. So just write your answer down exactly as it appears in the interval column. Just write it exactly as you see it. And then we're going to sketch an Ogive to represent the data provided. Now your Ogive is a graph, so it needs 2 sets of values. It needs an X value and a Y value. Now your Ogive is going to use your upper limit in your intervals, or I like to say the outside value. So just remember, for an Ogive, starts with an O, we're going to use the outside number, so the end number in my interval. And then because an Ogive is also known as a cumulative frequency curve, we obviously need to use the cumulative frequency. So we're going to plot those two. So where my X value is 30, my Y value will be 7. Where my X value is 40, my Y value will be 27, etc. And we get a series of dots, and we need to connect those dots. Now, you don't use a ruler to connect them, and I suggest you start at the last dot and work backwards. Okay, the reason is we tend to get lazy when we draw the graph, and we sometimes go a little bit past the last dot, and you're not allowed to. You have to end at the last dot. So I would start at the last dot and connect my dots backwards. And there are 2 things you need to remember. You need to remember your S shape, or your cobra shape. It needs to look like a snake. All right. So you've got to remember your S shape, and you have to remember to ground the Ogive. Now, if you're drawing your S shape from the last value back to the beginning and ground it naturally, you will probably get the grounding quite spot on. But if you're unsure of where to ground, the safest is to ground at the beginning of that first interval. So the very first interval is from 20 to 30. So the interval starts at 20. That would be the best place to ground it. Don't take your Ogive all the way back to 0 unless 0 is your very first value in your table. So be very careful. The grounding should be natural, and it should occur at the beginning of that first interval. We're going to take our Ogives now and answer a few questions. The first question, and it's a very common question if we've drawn our own Ogive, is to determine the percentage of marketing calls received by people older than 54 years. Beg your pardon. So what you're going to do is you're going to find 54 years on your x-axis, because the x-axis represents the age of the person. So find 54 and draw a line, a dotted line up to your Ogive. And then you're going to take it across, and I end on approximately 59. I end just below 60. Now, because we all drew our own Ogives, we will all have a slightly different value. So you could have 59, you could have 60, you could have 61. Just read your value off correctly, and you should be awarded all your marks. So 59 people were 54 years and younger, but I want to know how many were older than 54. So I've got to take 59 away from 80. So 59 people were 54 and younger. I want to know how many are older than 54. So 89 is minus 51 is 20, minus 59 is 21, and 21 out of 80 gives me 26.25%. Okay, so 26.25% of people were older than 54 years in this specific survey. Okay, so let's just go through that again. So you look for 54 on your x-axis, draw a line up to the Ogive and across to the frequency, and you read your 59, but I want to know how many are above that value, so that's why I subtract from 80. Then determine the median, and this is almost always asked if you've sketched your own Ogive. The median, remember, is the middle number in my set of values. Okay, and there's a formula that we can use, and we only use this with grouped data. Please don't use it with your raw data. So if I have grouped data, my formula is 80 plus 1 divided by 2. Now, why 80? 80 is my total in my cumulative, total of my frequency, okay, or the last number in my cumulative frequency. There are 80 people that were in the survey. So 80 plus 1 divided by 2 is 40.5, but that is the position. So I go to just after 40 on my Ogive, and I draw a line across to my graph and down, and I'm going to read my value off down there, and I estimate at approximately 45. It could even be 46 on this graph. Okay, so just read off the estimate, and I'm estimating it that it's approximately 45. So be careful, don't stop once you've calculated 40.5, because that is just your position. You've still got to then look for that position on the graph, and I get 45. Let's look at the interquartile range. It's another one that could be asked. Now you need to remember that your interquartile range is made up of Q3 and Q1. So first of all, Q1, the formula for Q1 is 80 plus 1 divided by 4. Because remember, the quartiles are a quarter of your data, so you want the first quarter of your data. So 80 plus 1 divided by 4 gives me 20.25, but don't stop there, that is just the position. So I'm going to just after 20 on my Ogive, draw a line across to my Ogive and down, and I estimate that is approximately 37, maybe 38. Okay, I'm going to use 37 for our purposes. And then we need Q3, which is 3/4 of my data. So I just take my formula for Q1, which is 80 plus 1 divided by 4, and I times it by 3 for Q3. And I get a position of approximately 60.75. So on my Ogive, I find just after 60, because it's 60.75. Take it across to my Ogive and down, and I estimate at approximately 53, maybe 54. And then my interquartile range is the difference between those two numbers. So 53 minus 37 is 16. So a couple of things that are very important here. First of all, show us where you're getting the readings on the graph. Write down the 53 and the 37 on that set of axes, and write down that IQR is then Q3 minus Q1, or 53 minus 37. So write down what values you are using. Don't just write the total, okay, because your readings could be slightly inaccurate, but you could still be awarded 1 or 2 marks for the actual calculation. Be careful. Right, the estimate mean of the set of data. Now remember, if we want to work out the mean of a set of data, we add up all the values and divide by how many there are. So we would need to add up all these numbers and divide by 80. My problem is I don't know how many people are 21 or 22 or 23. All I know is that there's 7 people somewhere between 20 and 30. So that's why we call it estimate mean. So I'm going to take the average in that first interval, the average in the second interval, etc. So the average in the first interval, the mean in the first interval, will be halfway. So 20 plus 30 divided by 2, so 25. Halfway in my next interval will be 35, 45, 55, 65, 75, 85, etc. So to draw the ogive, I use my outside value, but to determine the mean, I use the middle value in the interval. That's how I like to remember it. And we're going to use our calculators. Okay, so you're going to go shift mode, and you will come up with this screen. All right, now there's nothing on the screen that says anything about statistics. So we scroll down, and you get to the screen, and you'll notice it says stat, and you push stat, and it asks you if you want to turn your frequency on or off, and you obviously want it on. And the reason we want our frequency on is we don't want to have to enter 7 different times. We just want to write 25 in the X column and 7 in the frequency column. We don't want to have to write down 45 25 times. It's just going to take us forever. Okay, so we rather want to just be able to change the frequency of the number. Once you turn it on, it should stay on for your exams, but now you at least know how to do it if it does for some reason get switched off. Once you've got your frequency on, that is what your screen should look like. And remember to go there, you're going to choose mode, stat, variable, and that's how we get to our screen. Now when we did mean for raw data, your frequency column probably wasn't there, but now we've turned on our frequency and we can change it. And you're going to enter all your midpoints. So you'll enter your 25, your 35, your 45 in the X column. Then I will use my circle to scroll across, and I will enter all the frequencies. Okay, so all the frequencies will be listed as ones, and you're just going to change them to 7, 20, 25, etc. And then you go through the same process. So shift 1, we with VAR, and you choose number 2, your median, and the mean. And the mean in this data will be 47,45. So it's usually a 2 or 3 mark question. For one answer only, it's because it's going to take you quite a bit of time to enter that data. So for mean, we're going to enter the midpoint of the interval, and we're going to change the frequencies, and we end up with 47,75. All right, sometimes they give us an ogive and ask us questions about it. This comes from the November 2018 paper. And the only difference is if they give us an ogive, they expect us to be slightly more accurate in our readings. So first of all, how many players took part in the tournament? I'm looking for the highest point on my ogive, which is that point, and 50 is my frequency. So don't mistake it for the 40 down below. 40 is the ages of the players. Frequency is on the y-axis. So my cumulative frequency is 50, so 50 people took part. How many players were there between the ages of 24 and 31? So you're going to go to your x-axis. You're going to read off the value of 31. So draw a line up to your ogive and across. And I'm going to estimate that at approximately 40. And then I'm going to find out how many players are 24 years old. So I go to 24 on my x-axis because that's the age of the players. Take it across to the frequency, and I estimate that at 10. So how many people were between 24 and 31? 40 minus 10 gives me 30 players. So you would get a mark for taking those readings correctly and a mark for subtracting them to get 30. We need to determine the modal class. Now that is where the frequency, what number occurs most often. Okay, if we've got a list of data, we can figure out quite easily which number occurs most often. In a table, we just look for the highest frequency. But if we're given an ogive, we need to look for the interval, and you're going to follow the intervals at the bottom, so 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, etc., where your ogive is the steepest, where it climbs the quickest, okay? And it's in this section here, between 25 and 30, that is steepest, okay? So that is my modal class. So your modal class you'll find on your ogive where it is the steepest, so between 25 and 30. And we are going to complete the frequency column with the table below. So this is very similar to the way we started the very first question, is I need to ask myself, what number do I have to add to get the next number in my frequency column? So in my cumulative frequency column. So obviously I would have to add 4 to get 4, and then 4 plus 9 will give me 13, 13 plus 24 will give me 37, 37 plus 10 will give me 47, and 47 plus 3 will give you 50. And a further question here is they could ask you to then sketch a histogram, which is also some important revision. So make sure you look at some other graphs that they could expect you to draw from this data. Thanks for watching Max Maths. If you liked what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe.